Julian Hartford pushed through the heavy wooden gates of the Bavarian Christmas market with visible reluctance. At 29, he'd already conquered Silicon Valley, turning a college dorm room project into Streamverse, a social media platform worth $12 billion. The flashing lights and cheerful crowds felt alien to someone whose life revolved around server farms and shareholder meetings. Just 1 hour, he muttered to himself, checking his smartwatch. His publicist, Patricia, had practically begged him to attend something normal and humanizing before the upcoming Forbes interview. Apparently, being photographed at a Christmas market would soften his reputation as a workaholic recluse. The December air carried the scent of roasted almonds and pine. Families bundled in scarves laughed together, children clutched candy canes, and couples strolled hand in hand between the wooden stalls. Julian felt like an anthropologist observing a foreign culture, the candle stall wandering aimlessly. Julian found himself drawn to a corner stall that seemed quieter than the others. Unlike the flashy displays around it, this booth was simple, wooden shelves lined with candles of every shape and color, all glowing warmly in the twilight. Behind the counter stood a woman arranging votives with careful precision. She wore a burgundy knit sweater dusted with what looked like wax shavings, her dark blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. When she looked up, Julian noticed her eyes, hazel and remarkably present, as if she actually saw people rather than looking through them. "Evening," she said warmly. "Looking for anything special, or just browsing?" "Browsing," Julian replied, surprised by his own honesty. He picked up a cream-colored pillar candle embedded with dried lavender. "These are interesting." "That's my grandmother's recipe," the woman said, coming around the counter. She believed every candle should offer something beyond light, a memory, a feeling. That one's meant to ease worry. Julian turned the candle over in his hands. "Does it work?" She smiled. "You'd have to tell me. I'm Rosalie Bennett, by the way." "Julian," he said, deliberately omitting his last name. "Julian Hart." Beyond the transaction, Rosalie's stall lacked the aggressive salesmanship of the surrounding vendors. Instead, she talked about her craft with genuine passion, the difference between beeswax and soy, the art of selecting fragrances that complemented rather than overwhelmed, the patience required to achieve the perfect burn. "My great-grandfather started this business in 1947, she explained, gesturing to a faded photograph pinned behind her register. "After the war, he wanted to create something that brought light to dark times. Literally and figuratively." Julian found himself captivated. In his world, everything was metrics and optimization. Rosalie spoke about candlemaking as if it were poetry. "So you do this full-time?" he asked. "The shop is year-round, but the Christmas market is tradition. 3 weeks every December, rain or shine." She wrapped the lavender candle in brown paper with practiced efficiency. "What about you, Julian Hart? What brings you to our little market?" He hesitated. Usually, mentioning Streamverse led to immediate recognition, requests for selfies, or pitches for app ideas. "I work in technology. My team thought I needed to, experience more real-world interactions." Rosalie laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound. "Let me guess, they're worried you're becoming a hermit?" "Something like that." The workshop invitation. As Rosalie rang up his purchase, an elderly customer approached with questions about custom orders. Julian stepped aside, but found himself reluctant to leave. He watched Rosalie interact with the woman, patient, kind, remembering details about the customer's daughter's wedding. When the customer left, Rosalie caught Julian still standing there. "Still here?" she asked, amused. "I was wondering," Julian started, then paused. He made billion-dollar decisions without hesitation, but asking this question felt strangely vulnerable. "Could I see how you make these? The candles, I mean." Rosalie tilted her head, studying him. "Most people just want to buy and go. I'm not most people." "I can see that." She glanced at the darkening sky. "I close up in 30 minutes. There's a small workshop behind the stall if you're genuinely interested. Fair warning, it's not glamorous. I'll take that chance. The magic of creation. The workshop was exactly as Rosalie had described, not glamorous, but filled with purpose. Shelves held jars of dried flowers, essential oils, and colorful wax pellets. A double boiler sat on a hot plate, and wooden molds lined a workbench worn smooth by generations of use. "This is where it happens," Rosalie said, lighting a small burner. "The magic, as my grandmother called it." She demonstrated her process, melting beeswax and adding drops of vanilla and honey. Her hands moved with unconscious grace, the movements of someone who'd performed this ritual thousands of times. "You don't measure anything?" Julian asked, fascinated. "Not anymore. It's all feel now." She poured the golden liquid into a mold. "Technology guy like you probably finds that terrifying." "Actually, I find it refreshing." Julian watched the wax begin to solidify. "Everything in my life is measured, analyzed, optimized. This feels human." Rosalie looked at him with new curiosity. "You're not what I expected when you walked up to my stall." "What did you expect?" "Another tourist looking for Instagram photos." She smiled. "But you're actually interested in the process, not just the product." The unexpected pull. Julian's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket, undoubtedly his CFO about the Tokyo server expansion. For once, he didn't reach for it. "Popular person," Rosalie observed. "Work can wait." The words felt foreign but liberating. They talked as the candles cooled. Rosalie shared stories of learning the trade from her grandmother, of taking over the family business when she was just 23 after her father's unexpected death. Julian found himself sharing things he never discussed: the loneliness of success, the weight of constant decision-making, the hollow feeling of having everything but connecting with nothing. "You know what I think?" Rosalie said, carefully removing a finished candle from its mold. "You're successful at what you do, but you've forgotten why you started doing it." Her words struck deeper than any business critique he'd ever received. "Maybe you're right," Julian admitted, the moment of decision as Rosalie walked him back through the market, now quieter as vendors began closing for the night. Julian felt an unfamiliar sensation, reluctance to return to his regular life. "Thank you for indulging my curiosity," he said at the market entrance. It was nice having someone genuinely interested. Rosalie pulled her coat tighter against the cold. Most people just want to check Christmas market off their holiday list. Julian wanted to ask her to dinner, to continue this conversation over something more substantial than melted wax and childhood memories. But the words stuck in his throat, tangled with the knowledge that he'd already misrepresented himself by omitting his last name and downplaying his career. "Will you be here tomorrow?" he asked instead. "Every day until Christmas Eve," she confirmed, her eyes holding his for a moment longer than necessary. "Then I'll see you tomorrow, Rosalie Bennett." Walking back to where his driver waited 3 blocks away, he'd insisted on being dropped off far from the market. Julian felt the weight of the small wrapped candle in his pocket. It seemed heavier than it should be, carrying with it the possibility of something he hadn't even known he was missing. For the first time in years, Julian Hartford went to sleep thinking about something other than quarterly projections and market share. He thought about hazel eyes, the smell of beeswax and honey, and the way someone could make art from something as simple as light. Julian became a fixture at the Christmas market over the following week, though he varied his arrival times to seem less obvious. On Tuesday, he bought candles scented with cinnamon and orange. Wednesday brought tea lights that Rosalie promised would burn for 12 hours straight. By Thursday, she was laughing at his transparent excuses. "Let me guess," Rosalie said as he approached her stall again. "You desperately need another candle?" "My apartment is severely undercandled," Julian replied with mock seriousness. "It's becoming a safety issue." "Of course. Insufficient candlelight is a growing urban problem." She gestured to her display. "What's your excuse today? Bathroom candles? Closet candles?" I was thinking car candles. That's actually a fire hazard. They both laughed, and Julian felt that unfamiliar lightness again. In his regular life, conversations were strategic, purposeful. With Rosalie, they simply flowed, learning the craft. Rosalie began teaching him the basics of candlemaking during her slower evening hours. Julian discovered he was terrible at it. His first attempt resulted in a lopsided disaster that wouldn't stand upright, but Rosalie's patience never wavered. "You're overthinking it," she said, guiding his hands as he poured wax into a mold. "Feel the temperature, don't measure it." "I'm a technology person," Julian protested. "We measure everything." "Then maybe this is good for you." Her hand steadied his as the wax began to flow properly. Sometimes the unmeasurable things matter most. Julian became acutely aware of her proximity, the faint scent of vanilla that clung to her hair, the concentration in her expression. He'd dated before, mostly brief relationships with other tech entrepreneurs or venture capitalists, but nothing had felt like this. The growing deception each day, Julian's omission about his identity felt heavier. Rosalie talked about her modest life, the apartment she shared with her younger brother, the struggle to keep the family business profitable, her dream of someday expanding beyond the single shop. "What about you?" she asked one evening as they worked side by side. "You've been mysterious about your tech job. What exactly do you do?" Julian's throat tightened. "I run a platform. Social media. Not technically a lie, but nowhere near the full truth." "Oh, like managing accounts for companies?" He should have corrected her. Instead, he nodded. "Something like that." The guilt gnawed at him, but the fear of losing these moments, this connection, felt worse. In Rosalie's presence, he wasn't Julian Hartford, billionaire tech founder. He was just Julian, the guy who couldn't make a straight candle to save his life. The family stories. Rosalie opened up more as the days passed, sharing pieces of her history between customers. Her grandmother, Helena, had taught her everything, refusing to retire until Julian was confident in every technique. Her father had died when she was in college, forcing her to abandon her literature degree to save the family business. "Do you ever regret it?" Julian asked. "Giving up your studies?" "Sometimes," she admitted, stirring a pot of melted wax. "I wanted to be a teacher. But this connects me to my family in a way nothing else could. Every candle carries their legacy." Julian thought about his own family legacy, his father's disappointment when Julian had dropped out of Stanford to pursue Streamverse, their strained relationship ever since. Success had proven Julian right in his father's eyes, but it hadn't repaired what was broken. "Family is complicated," he said quietly. "That's the truest thing you've said all week," Rosalie replied, meeting his eyes with understanding. The snowstorm Friday evening brought an unexpected blizzard that swept through the market with startling intensity. Vendors scrambled to close early, and crowds dispersed rapidly as the wind howled through the wooden stalls. "You should get home," Rosalie said, securing her display against the weather. "This is going to get worse." "Let me help you pack up first," Julian insisted. Together, they worked quickly, moving inventory into the workshop and securing the outdoor displays. By the time they finished, the storm had intensified to near whiteout conditions. Rosalie pulled out her phone, frowning. "The trams have stopped running. They're saying nobody should be traveling." "I can call my..." Julian stopped himself before saying, "driver. I can arrange something." "In this?" "Not unless you have a snowplow on speed dial." She looked at the small workshop. "I've got a space heater and some emergency supplies. We might need to wait it out." Trapped together. The workshop became their sanctuary as the storm raged outside. Rosalie found blankets stored in a cabinet, and Julian managed to make tea on the small hot plate. They sat on the floor, backs against the workbench, watching snow pile against the window. "This is not how I expected my evening to go," Rosalie said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "Disappointed?" "Surprisingly not." She glanced at him. You're good company for someone who's supposed to be a tech hermit. Julian laughed. My team would be shocked to hear that. Tell me about them. Your team, your work. The real story, not the mysterious version you've been giving me. This was his chance to come clean, to explain everything. Instead, Julian found himself talking about the early days of Streamverse without mentioning its name, the late nights coding, the near failures, the moment when everything clicked. He made it sound smaller than it was, more personal. Shared dreams. As the hours passed and the storm continued, their conversation deepened. Rosalie talked about her dream of writing a book about her grandmother's life, of preserving not just the candle recipes but the stories behind them. Words matter to you, Julian observed. Always have. Even if I couldn't study literature formally, I never stopped reading, learning. She smiled. Books were my escape when the business felt overwhelming. What are you reading now? Poetry, actually. Mary Oliver. Do you know her work? Julian shook his head, and Rosalie's eyes lit up. She pulled out her phone and began reading aloud, her voice transforming the simple workshop into something magical. Julian watched her face as she read, the way she became the words, and felt something shift irreversibly in his chest. The first genuine laugh. Around midnight, punchy from exhaustion and the surreal situation, they began sharing embarrassing stories. Rosalie confessed to once accidentally setting fire to her grandmother's favorite tablecloth during a candle demonstration. Julian admitted to his disastrous first press conference where he'd frozen completely and had to be rescued by his publicist. Wait, Rosalie said between laughs. You just stood there? Silent? For 45 seconds. Felt like 45 years. Patricia still brings it up in meetings. They dissolved into laughter, the kind that comes from genuine joy rather than politeness. Julian couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like this, unguarded, unself-conscious, free. This is nice, Rosalie said when they'd caught their breath. Being snowbound with you. Yeah, Julian agreed, his heart beating faster. It really is. The almost moment. The snow had slowed to gentle flakes by 2 a.m. The space heater hummed quietly, and fatigue was catching up with both of them. Rosalie's head had drifted onto Julian's shoulder, and he'd frozen, afraid to move and break the spell. Julian, she murmured sleepily. Yeah. I'm glad you came to the market that first day. Me too. She shifted slightly, looking up at him. In the dim light, her face was inches from his, and Julian felt the pull of possibility. But he also felt the weight of his deception, the truth he still hadn't told her. Rosalie, there's something I should. Shoo, she said softly. Tomorrow. Everything can wait until tomorrow. She settled back against his shoulder, and Julian wrapped the blanket more securely around them both. Through the window, the Christmas market lay silent under fresh snow, and for these few hours, the world had narrowed to just this workshop, this moment, this woman beside him. Tomorrow would bring complications. Tomorrow, he'd have to decide whether to continue the lie or risk everything with the truth. But tonight, Julian Hartford allowed himself to simply be Julian Hart, the man who'd found something precious in the most unexpected place. As Rosalie's breathing deepened into sleep, Julian stayed awake, memorizing the feeling of this perfect, fragile moment before reality inevitably intruded. He'd built an empire on bold decisions and calculated risks, but nothing had prepared him for the terrifying vulnerability of falling for someone who didn't know who he really was. The snow continued to fall, beautiful and silent, covering everything in pristine white, including the cracks in the foundation Julian had built between them. Dawn broke over the snow-covered Christmas market with painful brightness. Julian woke to find Rosalie already up, making coffee on the hot plate, her hair messy from sleep and her expression contemplative. Morning, she said, handing him a steaming mug. Storm passed. The market's opening late today to clear the snow. About last night, Julian started. It was nice, Rosalie said quickly, not quite meeting his eyes. Really nice. But maybe we should talk about what's actually happening here. Julian's stomach tightened. What do you mean? Julian, you're wonderful. But I realize I don't actually know much about you. Your last name, where you live, what you really do beyond vague mentions of technology. She sat down across from him. I'm not usually impulsive. I don't usually spend nights talking with near strangers. So before this goes any further, I need honesty. This was it, the moment of truth he'd been both dreading and knowing was inevitable. You're right, Julian said. I haven't been completely honest with you. The unraveling. Before Julian could continue, Rosalie's phone rang. Her brother, checking if she'd survived the storm. As she reassured him, Julian noticed her scrolling through messages, her expression changing from relief to confusion to something that looked like shock. Julian, she said slowly, ending the call. What's your last name? Hartford. Julian Hartford. She stared at her phone screen, then at him. Streamverse Julian Hartford? The billionaire Julian Hartford? Someone had sent her a news article, a photo of Julian at a tech conference, surrounded by reporters, looking every inch the powerful executive he was. The caption read, Streamverse founder Julian Hartford announces expansion into AI integration. That's you, Rosalie said, not quite a question. Yes. The betrayal. The hurt in Rosalie's eyes was worse than any anger could have been. She stood up, putting physical distance between them. You let me think you were just some tech guy. Someone normal. Someone like me. Her voice shook slightly. I told you about struggling to keep my business afloat while you're worth billions. I worried about you getting home in the storm while you probably have drivers and assistants and... It's not like that, Julian interrupted. I mean, yes, I have those things, but that's not why I didn't tell you. I just wanted someone to see me, not my bank account or my company. So you lied instead? I didn't lie. I just didn't correct your assumptions. That's the same thing, Julian. Rosalie wrapped her arms around herself. Do you know how stupid I feel? Teaching you about candles like you're some ordinary person when you probably have people to light candles for you. I don't want people to light candles for me, Julian said desperately. I wanted to learn from you because you're passionate and talented and you made me remember why I loved creating things in the first place. The real explanation. Rosalie remained silent, so Julian continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. When I was building Streamverse, it was about connection. Helping people share their lives, find their communities. Then it became about growth metrics and shareholder value and expansion strategies. I forgot what it felt like to create something with your hands, to care about craft over profit. He stood up, keeping respectful distance but desperate to make her understand. Every day, people approach me with pitches or proposals or just wanting to say they met the Streamverse guy. My last 3 relationships ended because I could never tell if they wanted me or my connections. When I met you, and you didn't know who I was, it felt like breathing for the first time in years. So I was your authenticity experiment? Rosalie asked bitterly. No. You are, the first real thing I've felt in longer than I can remember. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry I let you believe something that wasn't true. But everything else, the conversations, the laughter, the way I feel when I'm with you, that was all completely real. Rosalie's conflict. Rosalie turned to look out the window at the market, where workers were already clearing pathways through the snow. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more thoughtful. My whole life is here. This stall, this business, this community. It's small and simple, and I've made peace with that. She faced him again. Your life is private jets and board meetings and a world I can't even imagine. How could that possibly work? I don't know, Julian admitted honestly. But I want to try to figure it out. Why? The question wasn't challenging, but genuinely curious. You could date models, actresses, CEOs. Why a candlemaker from a Christmas market? Julian moved closer, still giving her space but needing her to hear the truth in his voice. Because when I'm with you, I'm not the guy who has to make 50 decisions before breakfast. I'm not worried about stock prices or user engagement. You make me laugh at myself. You teach me things. You care about light and memory and legacy in ways that have nothing to do with money. He paused, gathering courage for complete honesty. Because for the first time since I built Streamverse, I've met someone who makes me want to be present in my own life instead of just managing it. The interruption. Before Rosalie could respond, voices outside the workshop grew louder. Several vendors had gathered near her stall, and through the window, Julian spotted something that made his blood run cold: photographers with professional cameras, clearly press. What's happening? Rosalie asked, confused. Julian cursed under his breath. Someone must have tipped off the media that I was here. It happens sometimes. As if on cue, there was a knock at the workshop door. One of the market organizers, looking apologetic and overwhelmed. Miss Bennett? There are reporters asking about Mr. Hartford. They're saying he spent the night here. I tried to send them away, but... It's fine, Julian said, his jaw tight. I'll handle it. But Rosalie's expression had closed off completely. This is your world. Photographers and reporters and people tracking your every move. It doesn't have to be yours, Julian said quietly. Doesn't it? If we're together, won't I become part of that circus? She gestured toward the growing crowd outside. I can't live like that, Julian. I won't. The choice. Julian looked at the reporters, then back at Rosalie, and made a decision that would have shocked his board of directors. He pulled out his phone and called Patricia. I need you to release a statement. I'm taking a sabbatical from Streamverse. 3 months, effective immediately. Michael can handle operations. He ignored his publicist's protests. Just do it, Patricia. And get security here to clear the press. He ended the call and turned to Rosalie, who was staring at him in disbelief. What did you just do? Chose you, Julian said simply. Or at least chose the possibility of you. I'm not asking you to enter my world, Rosalie. I'm asking if I can be part of yours for a while. Really part of it, not just playing at being normal. A sabbatical? You can't just walk away from a billion-dollar company. I can for 3 months. And honestly, the company will probably run better without me micromanaging every decision. He smiled ruefully. Turns out I'm not as indispensable as I thought. But why? Because you were right yesterday when you said I'd forgotten why I started. I need to remember. And because, he took a breath. Because I'm falling for you, Rosalie Bennett. And I don't want to lose this before I've really found it. Rosalie's decision. The workshop fell silent except for the distant sounds of market preparation outside. Rosalie studied Julian's face, searching for something, sincerity, perhaps, or certainty in the midst of his grand gesture. This is crazy, she finally said. Completely crazy, Julian agreed. You're going to get bored making candles and dealing with Christmas market tourists. Maybe. Or maybe I'll finally understand what it means to create something that matters on a human scale instead of a corporate one. Rosalie bit her lip, and Julian could see the war playing out in her expression, caution against hope, practicality against possibility. I can't promise this will work, she said softly. I can't promise I won't resent your wealth or your world eventually. I can't promise I'm worth giving up 3 months of your life for. I'm not asking for promises, Julian said, moving closer. I'm just asking for a chance. Let me stay. Let me learn your craft properly. Let me meet your brother and hear more stories about your grandmother. Let me prove that what I feel isn't about escaping my life but about building something real with you. Christmas Eve decision. Okay, Rosalie whispered, and Julian felt his heart leap. Okay, but on one condition. Anything. No more secrets. If this is going to work at all, I need complete honesty. About your life, your challenges, all of it. I can't be with someone I don't fully know. Deal, Julian said immediately. Starting now, I hate mushrooms, I can't sing to save my life, and I once accidentally crashed a Streamverse server because I was testing a feature drunk at 3 a.m. Despite herself, Rosalie laughed. That's a start. Julian took her hand carefully, half expecting her to pull away. When she didn't, he continued, I have commitment issues because my parents' marriage fell apart over my dad's business. I worry constantly that I'm not good enough at the one thing I'm supposed to be good at. And until I met you, I couldn't remember the last time I felt genuinely happy. Rosalie squeezed his hand. I stress bake when I'm anxious. I'm terrible at accepting help because I had to be strong for my brother after Dad died. And I'm terrified you're going to realize I'm completely ordinary and leave. You're anything but ordinary, Julian said softly. The new beginning. Outside, security was clearing the photographers, and the market was slowly coming back to life under the bright winter sun. Christmas was just days away, and the festive atmosphere was rebuilding along with the cleared pathways. So what happens now? Rosalie asked. Now? I help you open your stall. I probably make terrible candles that you'll have to fix. I meet your brother and try not to embarrass myself. Julian smiled. And I figure out what the next 3 months look like. What about after 3 months? Honest answer? I don't know. Maybe I go back to Streamverse and we figure out how to bridge our worlds. Maybe I discover I want something completely different from my life. Maybe we don't work out at all. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But maybe, just maybe, we find something neither of us expected. Rosalie leaned into his touch. I've spent my whole life playing it safe, building on what my family started. Maybe it's time I tried something unexpected too. Is that a yes? That's a yes to trying. A yes to 3 months. A yes to seeing where this impossibly unlikely thing between a billionaire and a candlemaker might go. Julian kissed her then, gentle and full of promise, as the Christmas market awakened around them. Through the window, vendors waved and smiled, already gossiping about the romantic drama that had unfolded in the Bennett workshop. When they finally pulled apart, Rosalie laughed breathlessly. This is going to be complicated. Probably, Julian agreed. But I've done easy my whole life. Maybe complicated is exactly what I need. Epilogue, the light they created. They opened the stall together that day, Julian fumbling with the displays while Rosalie directed him with patient amusement. Her brother, Thomas, arrived with deep suspicion that gradually thawed as he watched Julian genuinely defer to Rosalie's expertise. The press coverage was inevitable. Tech billionaire finds love at Christmas market, made headlines globally. But instead of hiding from it, Julian and Rosalie faced it together, releasing a simple statement about taking time to explore a new relationship away from public scrutiny. True to his word, Julian stayed in the city for 3 months. He learned every aspect of candle making, from sourcing materials to the delicate art of scent blending. He worked alongside Rosalie in her shop, met her friends, became part of her world. In return, he showed her pieces of his life, but carefully, always making sure she felt comfortable. They found a balance between his resources and her values, using his connections to help expand the Bennett Candle Company while keeping its artisanal heart intact. The relationship wasn't perfect. They argued about money, about publicity, about the fundamental differences in their lifestyles. But they also laughed, created, and built something together that was uniquely theirs, a partnership that honored both the light of tradition and the spark of innovation. And every Christmas Eve, they returned to the Bavarian Christmas market, to the small workshop where a snowstorm had trapped them together and forced truth to surface. They'd light a candle there, always one made together, both their hands shaping the wax, both their hopes poured into the flame. Because sometimes, the most unexpected encounters lead to the most illuminating loves. And sometimes, a billionaire and a candlemaker can create something more valuable than either money or craft alone. They can create genuine connection, the rarest light of all.